What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds DFS, and in today's video, we're doing our first look at the PrizePicks NBA board for Sunday. It's February 21st, a little bit after noon here on the East Coast, so just keep in mind that, as always, the projections in today's videos are likely to change throughout the day. PrizePicks has been on top of their game. They're making it challenging for us, and it wouldn't be fun to win if there wasn't a challenge involved. It would just get boring, right? So we got to try and stay ahead of the curve here, and always keep in mind that the projections are ever changing on PrizePicks. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome to Out of Bounds DFS. On this channel, we talk all things single-player daily fantasy sports. Right now, we're focusing on PrizePicks, Monkey Knife Fight, and we're mostly talking NBA because it's NBA season, and who doesn't love some good hoops? But if you're into single-player DFS, this is the channel for you. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, like this video, drop a comment below if you feel like it, and share this video with the entire world because we're growing. And we're growing steadily and pretty quickly. We're almost to 600. We're working our way there. So that's the next goal. So appreciate you guys supporting and tuning in. Today we've got a semi-short, but not too big of an NBA slate, medium-sized slate we'll call it. So let's talk injury news real quick. Starting at the top with Andre Drummond, who is continuing to be held out by the Cleveland Cavaliers as they look for a trade partner for him, which really helps out Jarrett Allen's fantasy upside and fantasy production. So bad news for Drummond, good news for Jarrett Allen. Aaron Gordon, power forward for the Magic, is going to be out indefinitely with an ankle. D'Angelo Russell, guard for the Minnesota T-Wolves, is going to be out indefinitely with a knee. Kevin Durant, forward for the Brooklyn Nets, has a hamstring issue that he's dealing with. He's also out indefinitely. Steven Adams, big man for the New Orleans Pelicans, he is going to be questionable with a right ankle sprain. Kyle Lowry, point guard for the Raptors, doubtful with a left thumb sprain. Drew Holiday, point guard for the Bucks, is out due to COVID protocol. DeLon Wright, we just got news on DeLon Wright. He's going to be out for the next 2 weeks with an adductor injury. Harrison Barnes, forward for the Kings, questionable with a foot. Blake Griffin is out indefinitely, forward for the Detroit Pistons. Cole Anthony, guard for the Orlando Magic, is out indefinitely with a rib injury. Mitchell Robinson, center for the Knicks, is out indefinitely with a hand injury. Paul Millsap, forward for the Nuggets, out with a knee injury. Rashawn Holmes, center for the Kings, is questionable with right knee soreness. Some of those Kings guys, Holmes, Bagley, they've been kind of iffy to play in a lot of these games recently. Marcus Smart, guard for the Boston Celtics, is out indefinitely. Larry Nance, forward for the Cavs, out indefinitely. DeAndre Hunter, out with a knee injury for the Hawks indefinitely once again, and that seems to be the theme. And finally, JaMychal Green, forward for the Nuggets, is out with a shoulder injury. So a little bit of a bump for Michael Porter Jr. with Millsap and JaMychal Green being out with injuries. So that does it for the injury news. Let's get down to business here. We've got a few games, several games to talk about, and we'll start things off with this early game, which tips off at 3:40 p.m. on the East Coast for PrizePicks. And we got to start things off by talking Jason Tatum, whose projections are on the rise. He was at like 44 recently. Now he's up at 46. So we're going to head on over to our site of choice, which is RotoGrinders, where I've already got the FanDuel projections loaded in. Now, the reason we use FanDuel is because their scoring system matches the PrizePicks scoring system for NBA DFS 1-to-1. So it's exactly the same scoring system. Now, Jason Tatum is projected at 46.27, guys. So looks like PrizePicks has him pretty dialed in here with their projection. Let's take a look at his recent games and see what he's been up to. So we'll go back to we'll do things a little different. We'll start 5 games back here. 54.7 against Detroit. That's an over. 22.6, major under. Ugly game for him there. 39.2, also falling quite a bit short of expectations. And then 54.2 against Atlanta in the first game of a back-to-back against them. And then 49.6 against Atlanta in that second half of that back-to-back. So as you can see, he's went over today's projection in his last 5 games once, twice, 3 times. So he's been playing pretty well lately, going over 3 in his last 5. Now, going back here, I don't see any recent games against New Orleans. So let's move ahead and talk about his minutes projection, where he's set up to play about 37 minutes, according to the fine folks over at Roto Grinders. He is a versatile forward. Now, versatile forwards against this New Orleans Pelicans team, New Orleans has been pretty good at limiting their output. You got long, athletic, strong guys such as Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Steven Adams if he plays today. So they got a pretty good front court there. And it's no surprise that they've limited versatile forwards like Tatum to just 31.1 fantasy points per game. Now, this is a 2 games in 3 nights situation for Jason Tatum. He's playing over 35 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute, very good at 1.25. And his usage is over 30.72. So those numbers look very nice for Tatum. Now, if we move ahead and talk game totals here and spread, we've got the New Orleans Pelicans projected to score 114.5 points at home. That makes them an underdog by 2.5 points. So for me, this is a green light go in terms of spread. And I'm also liking the game total here as it tops that 230-point mark when you combine the total scores of both teams. So loving what I'm seeing in terms of fantasy upside here. There's a lot of fantasy potential in terms of fantasy points, real life points. If you're looking to play single stat assists or rebounds, I think this is a good way to go. I mean, there should be plenty of points here up on the board, plenty of shots going up. And when the shots go up, that's more opportunities for rebounds and assists and real life points to go up as well. So liking what I'm seeing so far from this early game. Let's talk about a guy from the other side of this game. On the New Orleans Pelicans side of things, Zion Williamson, who is projected at 41.5 points. Now, the half point is always tricky for me. So they could have just made it a little bit easier and said 41. They could have just went up and said 42. But no, they split the difference, and we're stuck trying to figure out if 41.5 is a good number or not. So his projection on Roto Grinders is set at 40.21. Now, if you compare that to the 41.5, that gives him about a 1 or more in terms of being under his fantasy projections. So they like the under by about 1 to 1.5 fantasy points. So let's look at his recent games and see what he's been up to. Going 5 games back here against Dallas, 49.4. That would put him over. 45.1 would put him over. 51.4 would definitely put him over. And even better here, 54.2 would put him over as well. Now, really, the only game that he's went under on was his last one, and that was against Phoenix, where he only managed 30 fantasy points. So not a great game there, but as you can see, his shot attempts, his field goal attempts were way down compared to what he had been doing in his previous games. He only attempted 11 shots, but he did convert on 8 of those for a 73% field goal percentage. So very good numbers there. He just couldn't quite get it done. Didn't have as many rebounds as he typically does. So his numbers were just kind of down across the board. He has been playing a ton of games here lately, guys. So maybe fatigue is starting to catch up. The guy is like, 280, 285 pounds or something like that. He's a big boy. So, Father Time will catch up to you eventually, and that fatigue factor may be an issue here. Now, this is a situation for Zion where he's looking to play about 33 minutes against Boston. He is a versatile forward. Boston has done a pretty good job at limiting versatile forwards to just 30.82 fantasy points per game, so keeping them under 31 fantasy points per game. So I wouldn't call this a plus matchup or a positive situation for Zion. It should be difficult according to what we're seeing here. Now, this is a 2 games in 3 nights situation for Zion Williamson, but is it just me, or has Zion Williamson been on like darn near every slate that we've been playing on the NBA lately? I just feel like I talk about him almost every day, it seems like. But 32.5 minutes per game on the season is what he's been playing. 1.24 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of over 27. Very good numbers there. So again, I like the total from this game. I like the spread from this game. I think there's lots of upside here in terms of fantasy production. The only thing that's really working against Zion, in my opinion, is the fact that he's been playing a lot of basketball lately. Maybe fatigue is a factor here. 2 games and 3 nights in this current rest situation for him. And the fact that Boston is a pretty darn good team at limiting versatile forwards like Williamson. They rank 22nd in terms of most stingiest against versatile forwards. So those are the things that are kind of working against Zion Williamson today. Now, moving ahead here to the next game, we've got the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. This game doesn't tip off until later on. Got a 7:10 p.m. time here on PrizePicks, and the first guy we'll talk about is SGA, and he's projected at 40, which has, pretty much been where SGA's been in most of these games here recently as far as his projection. So not seeing a big shift in his projections daily. Staying right around that 40 mark. Now, his projections on Roto Grinders are at 40.32. So once again, PrizePicks has him pretty dialed in. I mean, they've done a good job of predicting or projecting his output tonight. So if we look at his recent games, you can see that he hasn't been doing very well, guys. And it's been a kind of an on-again, off-again situation as far as him making appearances for his team. Now, going back to 5 games ago against the Houston Rockets, he played under 30 minutes in that game, put up 32.9 fantasy points, which puts him well under the projection of 40 tonight. He missed 2 games, and then he came back and played 2 games. And in those 2 games, he played very well, 53.3 and 51.4. So very good games there. But then he sits out 4 games. And we got to go back here to 2 games back where he played 32 minutes and managed just 33.6 fantasy points per game. Or in that game, not per game, but 33.6 fantasy points in that game. And then the last game, which was, 2 days ago against the Milwaukee Bucks, played over 36 minutes, but only put up 25.3 fantasy points. So it's hard to trust SGA. He has been in and out of the lineup, and his production has been up and down. Now, I don't see any previous game logs to discuss of him versus the Cavaliers, so we can jump ahead and look at his minutes, where he's set up to play 34 minutes, according to the folks at Roto Grinders. Now, here is what stands out to me, and what's looking very good and positive for an SGA bounce-back game today. The Cleveland Cavaliers rank just 9th in terms of being the 9th most giving or 9th most fantasy points per game allowed to combo guards like SGA. So 51.5 fantasy points per game allowed by this Cleveland Cavaliers backcourt to opposing combo guards. So I love this situation for SGA, and I think this lends itself to a possible bounce back situation for him. Very good plus matchup, a good positive situation here for SGA. Now, this is 2 games and 3 nights for him. He's playing almost 34 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute are set at 1.18 with a usage rating of 27.68. So not, out of this world rock star numbers or anything, but very solid numbers nonetheless. Now, if we skip ahead and we look at the game totals and spread here, Cleveland 108.5. They're 2.5-point underdogs at home as they host the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, the Thunder are projected to score 111 points. So if you combine the totals here, you're looking at about 219, 220 combined points. Not my favorite in terms of totals. And the spread for me, though, still gets a green light. I still think that it's safe to play guys here in full game format, rather. So I'm not fading anybody in particular here. And I kind of do like how SGA is setting up in this matchup. So I kind of think this is a good situation for a bounce back for him. I know it's been kind of hard to trust him with him being in and out and the game logs looking so rough, but this could be a good spot for him to come back. Now, the next guy I'm going to talk about is Jarrett Allen, who has been making some fantasy noise lately. That 37 has been a number that I think has been well within his reach since Andre Drummond has been kind of kicked to the curb and sat on the bench by this Cleveland Cavaliers front office. So let's talk Jarrett Allen, as he is the highest projected player for this Cleveland Cavaliers squad. And as you can see, Roto Grinders has him currently set as a 2-point over. So they like the over on Jarrett Allen, and I tend to agree. He's been a pretty good consistent fantasy producer lately since Andre Drummond has been taken out of the picture. But let's look at his game logs for more. All right, so you can see why I am feeling Jarrett Allen over today. 43 in his last game against Denver, 39.3 against Golden State. 2 games in a row here where he's easily went over his projection of 37. Going back 3 games, 27.5, 38.2, and 34. So in his last 5 games, guys, he has went over today's projection of 37, 3 out of 5. So I do like his chances here. I think he's got a good shot of going over again. And I especially like in his last 3 games how his minutes have started to rise. 28 minutes, 29 minutes, and 33 minutes. So if he can get around that 30-minute mark today, I think he has no problem of going over this 37 here. Now, let's move ahead and talk about his minutes projection. Now, he is set to play 33 minutes, which bodes well for us who are taking Jarrett Allen and taking the over. There's a good chance here that he can hit 37 or more fantasy points. Now, he's a post-up big. Working against Jarrett Allen is the fact that this Oklahoma City Thunder team is the most stingiest defense in the league against post-up bigs like Jarrett Allen, and they're allowing just 19.26 fantasy points per game. So Al Horford and company must be doing a darn good job. Either that, or they're just not facing very good post-up bigs. So this is working against him here. Now, his rest situation is 2 games in 3 nights. He's playing a little over 26 minutes per game at 26.5. His fantasy points per minute are pretty good, 1.16, and his usage rating, as is the case with most post-up bigs, is pretty low at 16.72. Don't expect this guy to touch the basketball very much. The only time he's really going to be touching the ball is if he's getting an offensive rebound, defensive rebound, getting a little easy put back or a lob for a alley-oop dunk or something like that, blocking a shot, maybe the occasional steal or assist. But he's not going to be handling the rock or, they're not running the offense through him or anything like that, like a Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic. And we'll get to those guys in just a minute. But not too shabby there for Jarrett Allen. So looking at the game totals again, just to recap on that, the spread is a green light for me. I do wish the totals were higher, but maybe with the totals being lower, this lends itself to a better game for Jarrett Allen. Maybe there'll be more missed shots and more rebound opportunities. Maybe there'll be more block shots for Jarrett Allen. You never know. So that's another way to look at things. But I am taking Jarrett Allen and taking the over on him today, in fact. So there you have it for him. Now let's jump to the next game where we've got the Detroit Pistons taking on the Orlando Magic. Detroit, their top guy on the board today is Jeremy Grant, and he's at 40. And I kind of think the 40 has been a number that's been tricky for Jeremy Grant. I don't think he's been hitting it consistently. But let's see where he's projected at today over on our favorite little site here, RotoGrinders. Now, they got him at 36.5, guys, which puts him as a sizable, noticeable under here. So 3.5 points under the 40 that he's projected for on PrizePicks. Now, maybe we could get into the game logs and it will paint a clearer picture for us. Yeah. So you could see very, very rough game logs in his last 5. We'll go back to the 5th game here and start with that one and work our way back to his most recent game. 24.5 against Indiana. Terrible outing there. 27.5 against Boston. 28.4 against New Orleans. So he's not even coming close to 40 in any of these games, guys. And it's not because he's not out on the basketball court. He's actually out on the court, but he is shooting terribly in a lot of these games. I mean, look at this. 17 attempts, he only made 4. 16 attempts, he made 5. 15 attempts, he made 4. And then, things got a little better here against Chicago. He ended up with 45.4 fantasy points there. Had to shoot the rock 25 times, though. So if he's going to shoot the ball 25 times, or like he did here against LA where he shot 27 times and ended up with 53 fantasy points, I mean, dude, he's going to get there. But we can't rely on him taking 25 shots, as it doesn't happen very often here. Now, in his last game, he did shoot the ball 20 times, but again, just made 5 of 20, which led to a 25% field goal percentage. He has not been shooting the ball very well at all here, guys. So to recap his last 5 games snapshot here, he's only went over 41 times. So the under on Jerami Grant has definitely been the way to go. He has been hard to trust. Now looking back here, I don't have a game log of him versus this Magic team, so we can jump ahead and talk about his minutes tonight, where he's set to play about 36 minutes. Again, it's not that he doesn't get minutes. He gets plenty of minutes. It's the fact that when he's shooting the basketball, he's just not making them. And that hurts his fantasy output, definitely. You can see a definite correlation there. Now, he is a versatile forward, looking kind of positive for him here against this Orlando Magic team. Orlando ranking just 11th. So outside of the top 10 in terms of most generous or giving to versatile forwards, they are allowing almost 35 fantasy points per game. So not quite a plus matchup for Jerami Grant, but this is a situation where he should have probably 30 or more fantasy points in this one. 2 games and 3 nights for Grant, though, 36.4 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute just barely hit that gold standard of 1 fantasy points per minute or more at 1.05, and his usage rating, not elite by any means, but he's no chump either. I mean, 25.53 is still very good in terms of usage in my book. Now, moving ahead here and talking game totals and spread, this game is projected to be one of the lowest scoring, if not the lowest scoring game on the board today. Orlando, 106.25. is surprisingly a home favorite against this Detroit Pistons team. Detroit, no Blake Griffin, no DeLon Wright. Both of those guys are going to be out. So, it's going to come down to the likes of Saddiq Bey and Jerami Grant to try and carry this team here. Of course, Derrick Rose no longer in the picture. So somebody's got to step up, right? Now, Detroit being about a 2.5 point to 3 point underdog here. This is still a green light in terms of spread for me. This isn't a blowout risk or blowout situation. Looks like it's going to stay competitive. Looks like it's going to stay close throughout. I do wish the totals were higher here, though. Higher totals, again, mean more in terms of fantasy points, real life points, assists, and rebounds. So there you have it for Jerami Grant. I don't trust him. I'm probably taking the under. In fact, I have locked in an underplay on Jerami Grant to start the day. Now, the next guy is Nikola Vucevic, who is projected at 50 fantasy points. Big number there for Vuce. He's been very good this season, though, and the 50 is something that he can do and has done in the past. But today, Detroit looks like they might be a tough out for Nikola Vucevic. So RotoGrinders has Vuce at 46 fantasy points, which puts him almost 4 points under his 50-point projection. I know it's hard for me to take the under on some of these stars, but that might be the way to go here today. Let's dig into the game logs to find out more. All right, so as I mentioned, Vuce, pretty much the heart and soul, the backbone of this Orlando Magic team. He put up a huge game in his last one, 70.2, but we're going to wind it back to 5 games ago and start there. 45.1 against the Golden State Warriors would have put him under today's projection. 63.8 would have easily cleared him over 50. 33, terrible game there. 43.7, another game where he fell short by quite a bit. And then, as I mentioned, a huge game against Golden State, 70.2. So in his last 5 games, he's went over this projection of 50 just 2 times, 2 out of 5. Now, if you go back even further here, it's, been a mixed bag for Vucevic, but going over 50 is not easy for him. I mean, he's only done it in his last dozen games 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So like a 33% success rate in terms of going over. So, use that information and make of it what you will, but this is looking like a tough one for Nikola Vucevic. Now, his minutes tonight are projected at 35. He is a versatile big. The Pistons have done a decent job here. I guess it would be Mason Plumlee? Yeah, who's probably guarding Vucevic tonight. 32.56 fantasy points per game allowed to versatile bigs like Nikola Vucevic, guys like him. So not terrible, but definitely not a plus matchup or plus situation for Vuce. 2 games and 3 nights for him, playing almost 34 minutes per game, 1.38 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of over 28. Very good numbers, especially for a power forward, center, any type of big man like Vucevic. So again, just to recap, game totals, not my favorite. I wish there was more points on the board, but the spread is definitely a green light. Don't feel like you have to fade anybody from this game or that you can't take a superstar and target the over. But, you know, looking at the top 2 guys from each team here, I mean, Jeremy Grant and Nikola Vucevic, it's looking like the under is the way to go, as these guys have been anything but consistent, I would say, in their recent game logs. So we'll move ahead here and we'll talk Philadelphia 76ers basketball. We've got Joel Embiid at 52 fantasy points as he takes on the Toronto Raptors. Should be a very good NFC East? No. Should be a very good Eastern Conference matchup between 2 of the better teams. So Joel Embiid having a ridiculous, very good MVP career type year. His projection today is set up at 51.72 on RotoGrinders. So even if we were feeling generous and giving and we rounded this up and called it 52, well, that would put him right on the mark in terms of where PrizePicks has him. They're pretty dialed in. Now, we'll get to his last game, which was a huge monster type of game, maybe even a career best type of game for him. But and I think he did actually hit a career best in terms of points. But anyway, we'll go back to his 5th game here in the log, where he put up 62.4 fantasy points, which would put him well over tonight's projection. No problem there. 53.3 would also put him over. Now, this 48.6, although very strong performance, wouldn't have been enough for him to get it done on today's projection. He missed this game against Utah. Now, 2 games back, another monster, 60.7 fantasy points. And finally, we're back to this last game that he played, which was against the Chicago Bulls. He put up 93.9 fantasy points. My goodness. That might be a season high for any player in terms of total fantasy points. I don't know, but 93.9 points, almost 94 points. You just don't see 90 plus fantasy points every day, guys. So that's a huge number there. I'm taking a quick look over his recent game logs. I don't see a game of him versus Toronto. So we can move ahead here and we could talk minutes, where tonight he is expected to play about 35 minutes against this Raptors squad. He's a versatile big. Now, the Raptors have defended versatile bigs very well this season. They rank 22nd in the league. They're the 22nd most stingiest, allowing just 28, we'll call it 28 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs. Now, if this was just some nameless versatile big that we were talking about, I'd be a little concerned, but this is Joel Embiid, one of the better versatile big men in all the entire league, if not the best. So 2 games and 3 nights for him, 32.6 minutes per game, 1.63 fantasy points per minute, and his usage rating is well over 33, making him one of the most, if not the most productive fantasy players at the center position in all the league. So love what I'm seeing for Embiid. Now, with that out of the way, we can talk game totals and spread, where Toronto, they're expected to be a 3.5-point underdog at home. The Raptors, 110 points, facing this Philadelphia 76ers team, who are expected to score 113.5 points. So you're talking about a 3.5-point spread here. The game looks to stay competitive and close, according to Vegas odds makers. So I don't see any issue here in terms of blowout potential. This gets a green light for me. Feel good about playing anybody that you want in any situation that you want. Should stay close from what I'm seeing. Game totals are okay, not great. 223.5 points. I do wish they were higher. Of course, I like to go for 230 or more, as there's lots of fantasy potential and upside in higher totals like that. So there you have it for Embiid. Let's talk the next guy. And we've been talking Siakam a lot lately, so I feel like it's time we got to change it up here and head back down to Fred VanVleet. Let's talk the shooting guard / point guard, whatever you want to call him, combo guard. No Kyle Lowry tonight, so more upside here for Fred VanVleet, and his projections reflect such, as he is set to score 42 fantasy points according to RotoGrinders, or according to PrizePicks. Now, RotoGrinders, they've got him at 39.38, so that would put him under by a couple of points versus his projections over on PrizePicks. Now, we're going to open up the game logs and dig in a little deeper on VanVleet. And based on his projection tonight, looks like he's been struggling to hit this lofty total. So going back to his fifth game here, 34.1 against Boston, well under. 33.6, well under there. 50.3 against Milwaukee, though, guys, that would put him way over, so that's positive. But then 39 and then a 34.9. So in his last 5 games, he's like really not even coming close for the most part to his projection today of this 42 fantasy points. Only hitting that mark or more just one time, and that was against Milwaukee, where he put up a big 50-burger. So tough outing here for Fred VanVleet. Not somebody that I trust to go over based on recent game logs. Now, his minutes are set up at 36. He is a combo guard. Here's what's standing out to me and working in Fred VanVleet's favor. The Philadelphia 76ers don't do a good job against combo guards this year. They rank as the 8th most giving, 8th most generous, allowing almost 52 fantasy points per game. So this is definitely a plus matchup for Fred VanVleet, a positive situation for him where he should thrive. Now, fatigue may be a factor. 3 games in 4 nights situation. 36.6 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute and usage numbers aren't the greatest. They don't jump out off of the page for me anyway. So 1.1 fantasy points per minute with a usage rating of 24.7. Not the best numbers, but passable. They're okay. I mean, they're good, but not great. So again, just to recap, I don't mind the spread here at all. I think, you can feel safe playing anybody that you want in any format that you want. But I do wish that there were more points on the board. But working in Fred VanVleet's favor, and if you're looking at maybe taking the over, is the fact that Philadelphia just bleeds points. They just give away points in bunches to combo guards like VanVleet. And with no Kyle Lowry in the lineup, this guy should have the green light to shoot. His fantasy points per minute and his usage numbers should be up as well without Kyle Lowry around. So liking what I'm seeing for VanVleet. We'll jump ahead and we'll talk the next game. We got the Minnesota Timberwolves taking on the New York Knicks. We got Karl Anthony Towns leading the way here for this Minnesota squad. 45 fantasy points. This game is set to tip off around 7:10 p.m. tonight. So heading back to Roto Grinders and looking at the center position, well, this is awfully fishy. They got Karl Anthony Towns at 39.23 fantasy points. That would put him as a 5-point under, which is tremendous. You usually don't see that big of a discrepancy between these two sites, so it's kind of perplexing why he is so low, but maybe his game logs will explain why that is. Now, if we go back to his 5th game here, 45.6, that would be an over. 42.7 would be an under. 29.2 would be an under. 53.5 would be a healthy over. And his last game here against Toronto, 41.6. So no previous game logs against this Knicks team. We can jump ahead and talk minutes for Cat, where he's going to be playing about 32 minutes tonight. Not crazy minutes, but he hasn't been playing crazy minutes since coming back, really. He's a versatile big. Now, versatile bigs against this Knicks team. Knicks allowing almost 29 fantasy points per game. I don't think Mitchell Robinson will be playing tonight. So it'll be up to Nerlens Noel and probably some Julius Randle to try and slow down Karl Anthony Towns. Good luck. I like this matchup for Towns in both of those situations. If either one of those guys is on Towns, Towns should eat. And this is 2 games in 3 nights for Cat. He's playing almost 33 minutes per game, 1.37 fantasy points per minute. Fantastic number there. Anytime you're like 1.3 fantasy points per minute or more, you're like up in that elite category for me, up in that different stratosphere. So his usage is also very good, over 25 usage rating. Now, looking at the game totals and spread here, the totals are a bit lackluster. I wish they were higher. New York, 109.75. They're 3-point favorites hosting the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, Minnesota, 106.75. Not a ton of points there on the board. So, yeah, the green light for me, in terms of spread, but not loving the totals here. So, probably not a situation where I feel too comfortable, too confident taking any of these guys and going over on any of their fantasy points, single stats, you name it. So a little tough for me to go there on any of these guys. But we're going to talk Julius Randle. PrizePicks is working on something, I guess. Their page is wigging out. But Julius Randle's projected at 44. There we go. I don't know. Maybe it's going to fix itself. Julius Randle at 44. That seems to be like a constant static number on Julius Randle. They will not move off that 44 for nothing. Well, maybe they should, because Roto Grinders has him at 41.49, which would put him under by about 3.5 points, or 2.5 points, I should say. 2.5 point under. Liking that for Julius Randle. Let's see what he's been up to in recent games. All right, his last game, not a good one, 32.9. But let's head back to his fifth game here, where he put up just 29.1. Here's a big game, 50 burger, 50.6. 37.8 against Houston, not good whatsoever. 59.3 against Atlanta, great game. And then a 32.9. So he's in this little weird pattern of bad game, good game, bad game, good game, bad game. So that means good game? Maybe a good game here against Minnesota? Well, let's go a little further here and see if it makes some sense here to take an over. He's going to be playing 36 minutes. As a versatile big, this Minnesota T-Wolves team is the second most generous to versatile bigs, allowing 38.4 fantasy points per game. So what I typically look for, I like to see if this DVA number is higher than his projection for tonight. And in this case, it's not. So it's not a plus situation for me for Randle, but it's also not a terrible situation. So, take that for what you will. Now, he should be well rested, no back-to-backs or anything. 36.7 minutes per game, 1.2 fantasy points per minute. Very good there. And his usage rating is at 27, also very good. Not great, but very good. So I do wish there were more points on the board for this game, for this matchup. Unfortunately, there's not, but the game's spread is very competitive. So I expect this one to stay close. These teams, in my opinion, are probably pretty equally, talented. I don't see either one of these teams being that much better than the other. So we're reloading, refreshing. PrizePicks, you guys, I don't know what it is. Right around this time, they must be making a ton of changes on the back end or something. So, all right, next game, the Denver Nuggets versus the Atlanta Hawks. Now, in terms of fantasy potential, this is a good game to target. We're going to start with Nikola Vucevic, who is set at 56 fantasy points. Big number there for Joker, but if anyone can do it, it's Nikola Vucevic. Now, his projection on Roto Grinders is 55.55, which would put him as a slight under on this 56. Let's look at his recent game logs. He's been playing some pretty good basketball lately. Consistency is the first thing that stands out to me. So going back to 5 games ago against the Oklahoma City Thunder, 55.1, which would be just short of this 56. 57.2 would be an over. 63.7 would be an over. 57.9 also an over. And finally 57.4 an over. So he's went over in 4 of his last 5 games. I love the conversion rate there, the success rate of him going over. We don't have a game log of him to discuss against this Atlanta Hawks team, so we can jump ahead and talk minutes. He's going to be playing about 37 tonight. He is a versatile big. Now, I think this is going to be kind of a tough matchup for Nikola Vucevic, and here's why. Well, Clint Capella, for one, long, athletic, good defender. They've also got John Collins in that front court, another guy, super athletic, good length on him as well. So their front court is probably one of the most athletic and long and rangy, I would say, in terms of any front court in the entire league. So I like that in terms of like Nikola Vucevic. If you're feeling like taking the under here, I kind of see where you can go under on Nikola Vucevic, although never makes you feel comfortable taking an under on a guy like Jokic, who puts up 1.59 fantasy points per minute with a usage of almost 30. So I get it if you don't want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then just fade him. Don't even play him. But on paper here, this is not looking like a great matchup for Jokic. Atlanta allowing just 23.5 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs like Jokic. This is a 2 games and 3 night situation for Joker, 35.8 minutes per game, and we already talked his fantasy points per minute and usage. Great numbers, nothing more to be said there. Now I really want to get to this game total and spread here, as Atlanta is an underdog at home by 3 points, 114.25. Denver, 117.25. So you're talking just a 3-point spread. This is green light all day long in terms of spread for me. And a definite bright glowing green light in terms of game total, as this one tops that 230 combined point mark for me quite easily. So I expect some fantasy goodness. This is looking like a juicy game to target in terms of taking some overs on, fantasy points, single stat stuff, whatever you want to do. Do it here. This is a game to do it on. The next guy we're going to talk about is Trae Young, who's projected at 45, and Trae is also setting up to be in a very advantageous position here. Now, I know his projection is at 43.5. Let's just call it 43.5. But I'm kind of liking the over here on Trae Young and going against the Roto Grinders grain. But let's take a look at how he's been playing in his last 5. So if we go back to his 5th game here, it was the first in a string of very poor performances for Trae Young. 3 games in a row, in fact, where he failed to even reach 40 fantasy points. So under 40 in 3 games in a row. Now in his last 2, much better. He's starting to turn things around. 53.6 in his last one against Boston and 55.3 against Boston. So back-to-back games against this Boston Celtics team, who's a pretty good basketball team, right? So pretty impressive that he was able to hit 50 or more fantasy points on them. Now we can go ahead and talk minutes, where he's set to play 36 minutes tonight. He's a combo guard, and working in his favor is the fact that the Denver Nuggets on average this season are allowing more fantasy points per game than what Trae Young is projected to score tonight. So this is, again, one of them situations where I'd call it a plus matchup, a position where he could potentially go over this projection of 43.49 fantasy points. So despite the ranking where Denver ranks 28th, meaning that they're the 28th least giving, 28th most stingiest, however you'd like to phrase it or look at it, they're still giving up a pretty high average here. Now this is 2 games and 3 nights for Ice Trae Young. 34.7 minutes per game, to go along with 1.28 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of nearly 34. So his fantasy points per minute and usage are very good here on the board. So just to recap, liking the matchup here for Trae Young. It is a slight positive or plus matchup for him. I also love the game totals, and I also love the game spread here. So I'm kind of leaning more toward going against the Roto Grinders projections and thinking that Trae Young has an opportunity to go over his projection and be very, very close to this 45 or more fantasy points number. So that's how I'm approaching this game. So we can skip ahead here and talk the next one. As you can see, we have reached the end of the video. We're getting very, very close here. Just a couple more games to talk about. In this one, should be star-studded, should be action-packed. We got the likes of James Harden, Kyrie Irving for Brooklyn taking on Kawhi Leonard, Paul George for the Los Angeles Clippers. So plenty of stars to discuss, but we're only going to choose the very top one from each side of this game. So we're going to talk James Harden first. 56 fantasy points. Boy, does that seem steep. And wowie wow. You can see why I think it seems steep. Roto Grinders agrees with me. They think that 56 is just way too high. They have James Harden down at 50.37, which is over 5 in terms of an under. So he's under his fantasy projection on PrizePicks by 5+ points. All right, let's look at his game logs real quick. 53.5 in his last one. That would put him short against the Los Angeles Lakers. Well, let's go back to his game 5 games back. 34.7 against Indiana. This was a terrible game for him, no doubt about it. But then he had a very good bounce back here, 59.6. He went on to do 61.6, huge game in that one. 63.9 against Phoenix, and then came back down a little bit, 53.5. So in his last 5 games here, you can see that he's went over tonight's projection once, twice, 3 times out of his last 5 games. Now, we do have one game log of him versus this Los Angeles Clippers team. That was back on February 2nd, Groundhog's Day. He played over 43 minutes in that game, guys. 43 minutes. Didn't attempt a whole lot of shots, just 15. But he ended up with 58.4 fantasy points, which would be enough to put him over this 56 that he set up for on PrizePicks. So just something to look at. Now moving ahead here, 37 minutes is his projected minutes total tonight. Working in his favor is the fact that combo guards have done very well against this Los Angeles Clippers team. Clippers ranking 10th in terms of generosity, giving up 51.42 fantasy points per game. So that's more on a per game average than he's projected to score at 50.34. But this 51.42 still falls quite a bit short of this 56 number that he's projected on PrizePicks. So yeah, I would say that there's some upside here in terms of how many fantasy points that this Clippers team's allowing to combo guards, and the fact that he did well against this Clippers team in the last time that they matched up, also working in his favor. Now Harden should be well rested, energized, and ready to go here. His rest situation looking very good. He's playing over 37 minutes per game, which is, I mean, you go down the line here, nobody else is touching this 37 minutes per game mark. Huge minute numbers on the season. 1.36 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 28.38. Some of the better numbers that you're going to find regardless of position. Now we got to talk game total and spread here. This one has some blowout potential. And I think Kawhi Leonard and both Paul George should be playing in this game. And that may be the reason you're seeing a bigger spread than you would expect. This is a 7-point spread in terms of the difference here between the Clippers and the Brooklyn Nets. So Clippers 121.25, Brooklyn 114.25. I'm loving this in terms of game totals, especially on the Clippers side of things, but it's not bad at all on the Brooklyn Nets side of things. I can't give the spread a green light go, though. I got to give this one more of a yellow to orange, because with a spread of like over 5 for me, that starts to creep into some risk in terms of blowout. I do think Brooklyn has a pretty good team and should stay in this game. Like just, thinking about the rosters for both squads here, I do think that Brooklyn can compete with this Clippers team with Kyrie Irving and James Harden. So if it blows out, I think it'll happen later in the game. So otherwise, I'm loving the game totals and loving the upside here with all the points that should be scored. Next guy we're going to talk about is the Claw, Kawhi Leonard. He is projected for 49 fantasy points. So let's go find him on Roto Grinders and talk about him real quick. Now they got Leonard at 43.39 fantasy points, which would put him under by quite a bit. This is another situation where, geez, I mean, what a difference between these two sites. Now we got to go back and look at his game logs real quick. Now, if we go back 5 games ago, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, when we start there, Boston, he put up 48.7 points, which would be just shy of this 49. That would put him under. Here's another huge under at 33. Now he's got 2 games in a row here where he breaks 50, 57.1 and a 50 here. So that would put him under easily, or put him over easily rather. Then he missed 3 games in a row, and then his first game back after that long layoff, which was February 19th, 2 days ago, he ended that game with 42 fantasy points, which would be a pretty sizable under versus his projections today on PrizePicks. So in his last 5 games, to summarize, he has only went over this number twice and hasn't went over in a while as he's missed some games. Now, going back here to this previous matchup against Brooklyn back on February 2nd, he played over 39 minutes. he ended up with 64.5 fantasy points. So he turned on and turned it up against this Brooklyn Nets team, and I expect kind of the same. I expect them to challenge him and bring out the best in him, and I think that Kawhi will rise to the occasion here in this primetime matchup. Now, he's expected to play about 34 minutes tonight, is a versatile forward. This Brooklyn Nets team, they rank 25th against versatile forwards such as Leonard, allowing just over 30 fantasy points per game, so not a plus matchup. In fact, this looks like a tough matchup on paper, but there's no Kevin Durant here, so who are they going to run out there to try and slow Kawhi Leonard down? I have no idea, but I can guarantee you Kyrie Irving can't slow this guy down. James Harden can't slow this guy down, and I know for sure that Joe Harris isn't going to do anything to shut Kawhi Leonard down. So despite what it looks like here on paper, I'm loving the matchup for Kawhi. 2 games and 3 nights for him, playing over 34 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute are at 1.34 fantasy points per minute, and his usage rating almost at that 30 mark, putting him in that elite category, but not quite. So he's at 29.41. So just to recap, there is a little bit of a blowout risk due to the spread that I'm seeing, putting it in this yellow to orange for me, not giving it a green light by any means. I do like this matchup, even though the numbers on the board don't look so great for Kawhi Leonard. It looks like, hey, this Brooklyn Nets team is a tough out for Kawhi Leonard. I don't believe it, because I just don't think they have anybody that's really going to slow this guy down. Nobody that really matches up very well for him. So, yeah, while I don't agree with his projection on Roto Grinders, this 49 has also been a number that's been kind of hard for Kawhi to hit. So I think he's somewhere in between what you see here on PrizePicks and what you saw over on Roto Grinders. But it's hard for me to feel like taking the over on Kawhi Leonard. It's probably just a situation I'm going to avoid unless I gain some clarity when I put together tonight's spreadsheet. So anyway, moving on. The final game, we've reached the end. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. We got De'Aaron Fox, who's projected for 41 fantasy points. 41 against this Milwaukee Bucks team. Let's see what Fox is projected at on Roto Grinders. Well, 41 is not out of line whatsoever. 41 actually seems to be very much in line and looks to be about right for De'Aaron Fox. Let's look at his game logs real quick. All right, so he's been struggling in his last 3 games. But we'll go back to 5 games where he put up 56.2 against Philly. Love to see that for him. And then a 43.9. So 2 games in a row where he went over. But then the slide, the streak of bad games comes in. 37.6, 29.8, and 39.1. So 3 games in a row here, guys, where he has failed to even come close to this 41 mark. I mean, 39.1, somewhat close, a shot falling here or there and he's over, but he's fallen short in his last 3. Just call it what it is. Going back here against this Milwaukee Bucks team, I don't see any game logs versus them. So we can jump to minutes where he's expected to play about 36 tonight. Now, here's what stands out to me and what is working for De'Aaron Fox. Although this Milwaukee Bucks team ranks 24th, which looks intimidating in terms of matchup, like a situation you'd want to avoid, well, they are still giving up an average of 45.44 fantasy points per game, which would put him in a plus matchup, a positive situation, as this average by the Bucks is higher than his projection in terms of fantasy points tonight. So I do like this situation for De'Aaron Fox. I don't believe that this streak of games can continue for much longer. I mean, let me just open up his game logs again real quick. Yes, he's had 3 games in a row where they're really bad, but at what point has he had 3 games in a row really bad? Like either like fatigue is just setting in or something, that we don't know about is bothering him or something, but he's got to break out of this slump, break out of this streak, this bad streak, cold streak at some point, right? I don't know if it's today, but hey, it's setting up kind of nicely here on the board. Now, this is a back-to-back 3 games and 4 nights situation. So, yeah, those minutes are starting to probably add up on the legs of De'Aaron Fox. And not only his legs, but his shoulders too, as he continues to be the focal point of this Sacramento Kings team. Now he's playing over 33 minutes per game, 1.18 fantasy points per minute, to go along with a usage rating of 31.02. So usage is great. Fantasy points per minute, just okay, pretty good. Not anything elite in my opinion. So let's move ahead and talk game totals and spread now. Milwaukee, massive favorites. In fact, this is probably the only game on the board that I'm going to say is a red alert. Warning. This has blowout potential written all over it. So that's really the only thing for me that's like working against De'Aaron Fox here, is the fact that he's been playing a lot of basketball. This is 3 games in 4 nights and a back-to-back for him. And the fact that there's a huge blowout on the board in this game. Blowout risk, definitely a thing. So, you know, maybe this isn't the spot where he bounces back. The matchup looks good, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to get enough minutes, as this game does not look to be a competitive one. Milwaukee, 10.5 point home favorites here. Loving the game total, though. Game total's a good green light for me, but the game spread is a definite red zone for me. Finally, to wrap up this video, we've got Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek Freak. The last guy to talk about. We saved maybe the best for last here. 59.3 is his fantasy projection, putting him over this 58. And he's been playing some good basketball lately, guys. So we'll go back 5 games here. Start from there. 65 against this Utah Jazz team. 72.4 against this Oklahoma City Thunder team. 74 against Toronto. 50.4 against Toronto. And 72.8 against OKC. This dude has just been balling out of control. I guess he wants those all-star votes or something. So in his last 5, you could see that he's went well over tonight's projection easily in 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 5 games. This guy's got 3 70-plus performances in his game log. So just playing outstanding basketball at the moment. Now, no recent games against Sacramento, so we can go ahead and talk minutes. 35 minutes tonight. He's a versatile forward. Sacramento giving up 31.48 fantasy points per game to forwards like Giannis. So not great on paper, but this is the Greek Freak, the alphabet, ABC, whatever nickname you want to use. This dude's a former league MVP. I mean, he's one of the best. 3 games in 4 nights for Antetokounmpo, playing almost 34 minutes per game. His fantasy points per minute, 1.63. Does it get any better than that? I don't think so. And his usage rating, 33.83. Elite. So my biggest worries here are going to be the game spread. This game's going to blow out. You have to hope, if you take Giannis Antetokounmpo and you take him if you take him over in a full game format, you have to hope that he is the focal point, the main reason why this game becomes a blowout, that he is just going absolutely insane, and that Chris Middleton or DiVincenzo or one of these guys aren't having great games. Or it was like Pat Connaughton a couple nights ago, just came out of nowhere. But anyway, if you're going to take Giannis Antetokounmpo here, make sure you do it and hope that, you know, he is the man and is just balling out and is the main reason why this game becomes a blowout. But you guys tell me what you think. Drop a comment below. Who are you liking? Who is standing out amongst the group that I have talked about in today's video? I like to hear your feedback. I like interacting with you guys. I ain't gonna lie. So drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. You taking that guy and you taking him over, under? You know, what are you feeling? Appreciate all your support. We're looking to bounce back. Curtis Razor Blades, you hurt our feelings last night. If you played MMA and you were in the Discord, by the way, link to the Discord is in the description of this video. Curtis Blades let us down. It was a late night hammer that dropped and hurt our feelings. So we got to get some of those monies back tonight on PrizePicks. So this is CJ for Out of Bounds DFS, guys. Happy Sunday to you all. Good luck today. Let's go win some money. And then until the next one, we'll catch you then. Peace out.